All right, what is up, guys? Back again with another session today. Today was day number 9 of the bulk. Mixed leg day today. So, when I say mixed leg day, I mean this is my day that I have a good bit of quad work, but it's still predominantly hamstring focused. As you can see here, we're starting with hamstring work. Obviously, a prone or lying hamstring curl. As an alternative to this, there's a lot of different variants for hamstring work. You can do walking lunges, you can do RDLs or stiff leg deadlifts. With obviously, if you're doing an RDL, more of a hamstring bias, which is kind of kicking those hips back a little bit less and keeping the knees a little more rigid. And you can even do seated leg curls or standing leg curls if your gym has a machine for that. So lots of different alternatives here, but I am starting with a prone hamstring curl. I load this pretty heavy to start. Just a couple of warm-up sets here at the start, but then we get into 3 working sets, and total session time for today was actually relatively short, only a little bit over an hour here, about an hour and 4 minutes. These first 2 sets I do, both same weight, 130 pounds, 8 to 12 reps on both of those first 2 sets. I hit 11 reps and then 8 reps. We dropped the weight a little bit from my previous session here, just because I moved to this machine. Previously, I was doing this movement on a Nautilus machine, which has a little bit of a lighter stack than the Cybex machine. This machine overall feels much better though. I love how this feels, so I stuck with this. So technically kind of a load regression, but not really. Overall, still hit the rep range, felt really good. The movement felt great today. Love this machine. Happy to make this swap. So yeah, didn't drop the weight for the second set. Ended up just doing 130 for 11 and then 130 for 8. Again, range of 8 to 12. So we will stick with this weight next week on the 2 top sets and on my back off set as well. My third and final set, which is my back off set, I dropped down to 100 pounds from 130 and hit 14 reps. Now the goal on that is 15 to 20. I'm not super concerned with hitting that higher portion of the range as long as I'm failing on that third set and it's still an effective set. And it was. 14 felt really good on this. The reason we're adding that 15 to 20 in is just for some higher rep range, kind of metabolite work on the hamstrings to round out this movement. But again, it's not super imperative that I don't have to be in the 15 to 20 range. Obviously, we're close. I'm going to keep the weight the same, and I'll keep taking progressions on those first 2 top sets as well. Like I've mentioned in my previous videos, for me, working in a lower rep range, and I shouldn't say low, but lower rep range of like anywhere from like, I would say 6 to 12, but more often than not 8 to 12 is kind of my ideal range for really any movement. Pressing movement I can sometimes get to higher volumes on, but unless it's a really small isolated muscle, 8 to 12 is just kind of my go-to range. That being said, again, 130 for 11, 130 for 8, and then 100 for 14 to round off this movement. Felt great. Super happy with it today. Great session overall, by the way. This whole session was great. But moving into the seated leg curls, 105 for 15 is going to be this first set here. This is kind of a moderate rep range, 10 to 15, and we hit 15 here. This movement, I will probably increase the weight on next week. Normally on the 15 rep range, I would like to get 2 over. This felt really good today, though. We'll see. We'll see how it feels next week. As always, it's kind of going off feel going into the next session. If I get on and the weight feels real heavy, we're just going to go and do maybe a top set and then a back off set next week. We won't keep the weight the same across both sets like we did this week. But for now, the plan is to just go up to 110 next week. Again, we got 105 for 15 here, and then the second set is going to be 105 for 12. The rep range goal was 10 to 15, so high end of the range and then pretty much right in the middle of the range. Felt awesome. This really felt good today. My hamstring work has just been really clicking with me lately. Really happy to see that I'm kind of progressing on that and everything's kind of falling into place as it needs to. It just feels good. I feel like I'm getting the movements locked in a little bit better, and that's awesome to feel, because hamstrings, being one of my weak points, are obviously also a big focal point for my programming. So having improvements there, or taking improvements there, making improvements there, is my priority, and it's happening, and it feels great. All right, and then rounding off that movement, got a couple partials in there at the end. We're going to be moving into my first quad movement for the day, which is hack squats. You can see here, just warming up with a single plate. I like to get a lot of good warm-ups on this movement. The more I can warm my knees up prior to actually doing any quad work, the better. I've had some knee issues in the past, so being able to work through that is really, really imperative for me having a good solid set here. But this has just been feeling great week over week as well. I think I move up to 2 plates here for the next warm-up set. I don't know what I did there, 4 or 5 reps, and then I think I do like 3 or 4 here for the second warm-up set before moving into my working weight and my working set. Working rep range for this movement is going to be 8 to 12 on both sets. I have 2 sets here. And the last few weeks, this has just been feeling really good. So I've just been doing a straight set, same weight on my first set and my second set. And then here you can see 3 plates, 270, end up hitting 12 here, which is awesome. Honestly, I probably had 13, 14 in me here. I just don't like pushing this too hard and really close to failure just because of my knees. Little bit apprehensive there, but again, this felt great. Next week, the weight is going up for sure here. We'll take a 10-pound progression on this since it's a little bit of a bigger movement. Go up to 280 next week. And the second set will probably move up as well since I hit the middle of the range with the same weight. Usually if I'm able to hit like middle of the range or high end of the range for my goal on my second set, I'll just increase the weight as well alongside my top set, even if I didn't max out that second set, at the high end of the rep range. Now, if let's say today I would have only got 8 reps, which is the low end of the range here for me, then I would have kept that weight the same and just moved the top set up next week. But for now, the plan next week is to move both sets up to 280. These felt great today, though. These were really awesome. Again, this has been another movement. In fact, this whole day, all of my leg work really has just been really falling into place and feeling good. It's in a great place, and I'm super happy that I have it in a great place, because there have been a lot of little issues with my legs. Like, again, obviously needing to bring up hamstrings, needing to bring up calves, needing to address some knee issues, needing to address imbalance in my quads. And everything that I need to do to fix those issues is working. So that's a good feeling. So really happy with how this day played out. Really excited to hit it next week and keep pushing numbers up. Food is moving. I'm feeling great. I feel awesome today. This was just the easiest this session has ever been, actually. So moving on, we're going into leg extensions. I only have 2 sets of these, actually. You'll notice that my quad volume overall is really very low. I have the hack squat, I have these, and then later in the week, I have 3 sets of single leg press. So 2, 4, 7 total sets of quad work throughout the week. That's it. But this is a much higher rep range. These are 12 to 20. These burn. This was kind of my quad burnout, is what I like to call it for this session. 2 sets of 12 to 20. Not super heavy weight here, but loading it as heavy as I can comfortably for the knees. 95 pounds here. Ended up hitting 20 reps on this top set, so right at the high end or the top end of that rep range. We'll probably keep the weight the same next week, though, and clean up those last few reps and try to get a couple more before I move the weight up. Again, the goal here isn't to keep progressing the weight up. The goal is just take progressions wherever I can, and I think rep progressions and a little bit of a form improvement here would be more beneficial than just throwing more weight onto it. Second set, though, we end up doing the same weight. I put 95 pounds on again and hit 14 reps in the second set here. So that was a rep progression on both sets. I think last week I hit, I think it was 19 and then 12. for the first set and the second set respectively. And again, this week, 20 and 14. So these were great this week. I will say also, on my previous movement on the hack squat, I took a 2-rep progression. The weight didn't actually go up this week, but I hit 2 more reps on my top set and matched my second set. So that was an improvement there. Overall, this whole session improved. Every exercise I moved up either in reps or in weight. That's awesome to see. And I feel like I took a lot of form improvements throughout this whole session as well. Specifically here, moving into the adductor machine, the adduction machine, which is going to be my next movement. You'll notice if you saw my previous video that I'm using a different machine for my adductors here. This is one of the Cybex machines. I just moved over here because it loads a little heavier than the pre-core machine, and the pre-core machine was getting pretty close to maxing out the weight for me. So these felt good. I actually liked the setup on this a little bit more than the pre-core machine as well. It's been a while since I used this one, but it's more comfortable to hold this machine in the pause without taking tension off the adductors. So this felt really good. I should say hold this in the stretch, not the contraction, but hold it in the stretch. Kind of to give it a pause in the stretch is a little more comfortable. So top set here is 175 pounds for 12 reps. Goal is 10 to 15. So right on, I guess, low end of middle for that top set. I ended up doing a back off set here and dropping the weight a little bit since we didn't max out that top end set. And I hit 150 for 9 here on the second set, which is a little under the rep range. I might end up dropping that back off set down a little bit next week. Maybe drop it down to like 130 or something and try to really just pump out some more volume work. Maybe hit 15 on that rather than, like trying to hit 10 with 150 next week. But we'll see. Again, if next week I go up to, do the top set and 175 feels really, really good, I hit 15, then I'll just keep it or just drop down to 150 like I did this week. And then the very last movement for the day is going to be seated calf raises. 90 pounds on the machine here. This one really stayed about the same for me. Didn't really progress here. This was probably the only thing I didn't make a progression on, except for my form. I cleaned this up a little bit because I played with the positioning of these knee pads to try and get a little bit of a better stretch in the bottom for my calves here. Previously, I had this pad a little bit lower, like 1 notch lower, and I wouldn't get as much of a stretch in the bottom just because of the way it would load over my knee. So 90 pounds here, 17 reps, and then honestly, I kept it the same weight for all 3 sets. So 90 pounds for all 3 sets, 17, 12, and 10 was the rep progression across the movement. 12 to 20 is the goal. So this felt really good. As with all of my calf movements, something you'll see me do here is pause on the bottom and then really drive up. Give it an aggressive contraction. So that was the goal. I always keep that in mind when doing my calf work, regardless if it's seated, standing, or a toe press. Always try to keep that in mind. And this felt good. Not too upset about not taking a weight or rep progression here. I think we'll nail it next week. I think next week I've easily got 20 in me on that top set. The only thing I was considering here is maybe dropping my final set in weight a little bit just to really get some more high volume work in for the calves. But I'll have to see about that because I have high volume work in for my calves on other days of the week. So it's not a super high priority. My toe press is, usually I'm always hitting 20 reps on that. My standing, I'm usually always hitting 20 reps on that. So I think having a little bit of more weighted work here, and specifically in the seated movement, is pretty beneficial. So we'll see what happens next week, but it felt good. Super happy with this movement. Overall, the day was great. Just felt awesome. Everything clicked. Got an insane quad pump, which is something I have not had for a long time, not having food in me. It's one of the muscle groups that just really doesn't keep that, keep that blood flow up in a deficit. It's a little bit harder to get a solid pump in pretty much all of my pressing or pushing movements, whether it's quad, shoulders, triceps, chest. When I drop into a deficit, it's always the push stuff that goes first. All of that, my capabilities with pushing is really what goes first. Now, again, I say goes first, meaning, it's making it sound like I'm, just dropping all of my work right at the start of a deficit, but that's not really how it happens. It just kind of progressively gets there over time. And it's usually just that last week or so it really goes. So yeah, that is it here, guys. I moved over to the mirror for a little pump check today because I was just feeling it. Felt awesome. Legs were feeling great. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there, and I will see you guys in tomorrow's session, which is going to be a chest-focused push day. Until then, guys, take it easy.